Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the first chapter of a really cool new serial podcast I found called The Penrose Effect. It's a psychological mystery drama, and the first chapter is called Fractured Patterns. And we're going to do this one a little different. We're going to kind of do it like those old radio drama reviews, where we'll kind of read through it first, and then we'll have a little chat about it afterwards.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So let's jump into Fractured Patterns.
Right.
The morning felt like any other, ordinary in every way, except for a quiet itch at the back of my mind. A subtle but persistent sense that something was off. It was a cool day, the city buzzing with its usual rhythm, people flowing through the streets like currents, each one preoccupied, each life a closed circuit. I watched them as I sipped my coffee, blending into the anonymity of the crowd.
The barista called my name, and I stepped forward to grab my order. As I lifted the cup, my eyes caught something scrawled in black ink on the side, something that sent a strange chill through me. I blinked, staring at it, my heart pounding as the name seemed to echo back at me from the empty spaces in my mind. I hadn't told the barista my name was Prometheus. In fact, I hadn't told anyone that name. It wasn't even my name, yet somehow it felt familiar, like an itch in my brain that I couldn't scratch.
I told myself it was just a mistake, a fluke of chance, or a careless slip from a barista having a bad day. But as I walked to work, that name lingered, weaving itself into my thoughts, pulsing with a strange intensity.
I passed an alley, and on impulse, I glanced down its dim length. There, painted on the wall in bold, looping letters, was a single word, Hercules. It looked fresh, the paint still gleaming in the early morning light, and as I stared at it, I felt something tugging at the edges of my mind, a feeling too faint to grasp, but too strong to ignore.
The name Hercules seemed to vibrate, resonating with the same rhythm as Prometheus, each word threading itself into my consciousness with a purpose I couldn't decipher. They felt connected somehow, part of an invisible web that stretched beyond my understanding. I shook my head, dismissing it as coincidence. But the thought clung to me like a shadow.
Work was a blur. Tasks blending into one another, conversations reduced to static in the background. My mind drifted, circling back to that strange moment in the cafe, the name scrawled on my cup, the graffiti in the alley. It was silly to obsess over it, I told myself. Just meaningless words. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being nudged towards something, as if these fragments were pieces of a larger puzzle I was supposed to solve.
At lunch, I ran into Leela, one of my coworkers, and we made the usual small talk, but there was something different in her gaze. A flicker of curiosity, or was it recognition? She watched me with an intensity that felt out of place, her smile thin and knowing.
Have you ever heard of the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon? She asked, her tone casual, but her eyes were sharp.
It's like when you learn a new word, she explained, and suddenly, you start seeing it everywhere. Or, in your case, a name.
Prometheus, I said, the word catching in my throat.
Leela nodded, her gaze unwavering. Sometimes, she said, leaning closer, it's your mind's way of telling you something you might have forgotten.
Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease that had been simmering inside me all day flared into a full-blown anxiety attack.
The rest of the day passed in a haze of forced smiles and feigned concentration. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on work, those two names, Prometheus and Hercules, circled back, like vultures drawn to carrion.
As I walked home that evening, the city seemed to press in on me, the buildings towering like silent judges. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat, every whispered word a potential clue.
I reached my apartment and fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking inside. The silence was deafening. It was then, in the stillness of my own home, that I heard it, my name, whispered from the shadows.
Prometheus.
Sleep offered no escape. I was plagued by fragmented memories, flashes of faces I didn't recognize, places I couldn't place. A kaleidoscope of images swirled in my mind, disconnected and unsettling. And always, that whispered name echoed through the darkness, taunting me with its familiarity.
The last thought I had before I finally succumbed to a fitful sleep was a chilling one. Some things are forgotten for a reason. Man, that was creepy. I don't know about you, but I am hooked. The way the author just builds this feeling of dread, it's so subtle at first, like just this nagging sense that something's wrong.
Yeah, I totally felt that too. Like everything seems normal, but there's just this underlying tension, like something bad is about to happen.
Yeah, and then boom, we get that name on the coffee cup, Prometheus. Chills, literal chills. What do you think is going on there? I mean, that name, why does it feel familiar to the protagonist?
Well, it seems like the name is like a trigger, something that's supposed to unlock some kind of hidden memory or something. Like it's connected to something the protagonist has forgotten.
And then we get Hercules, too. Like, what's the connection there? It feels so deliberate.
Yeah, it's almost like those names are clues, like pieces of a puzzle the protagonist doesn't even know they're trying to solve.
And then there's Leela. She mentions the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, which, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like when you learn a new word or see something new, and then you start seeing it everywhere.
Right, like it was always there, but you just never noticed it before.
Exactly. So is that what's happening to the protagonist? Are they just noticing these names because they're already on edge? Or is there something more going on?
I think that's the big question the author wants us to ask. Is the protagonist's mind playing tricks on them? Or are these names actually significant? And Leela's comment about it being your mind's way of telling you something, that definitely makes it seem like there's more to it.
It's almost like Leela knows something, like she recognizes something in the protagonist.
Yeah, I got that feeling too, like she's holding something back.
Ugh, so much mystery. And then that ending, the whispered name, the fragmented memories. Some things are forgotten for a reason. It's like the protagonist is on the verge of remembering something terrifying.
The author really knows how to build suspense. Like you can just feel the protagonist's fear and anxiety.
It's so well done. I am so ready to find out what happens next. Speaking of which, the next chapter is called
Shadows in the Mirror.
Oh, that sounds ominous.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're going to get even deeper into the whole fractured memory thing.
Right. Like, what is the protagonist hiding from? And why did they forget it in the first place?
And is it actually something to be afraid of?
Yeah.
Or is it just their mind kind of messing with them?
I also really want to know more about Leela.
Yeah, she's definitely a wild card.
Like, is she trying to help the protagonist? Or does she have her own agenda?
Yeah, and what did she mean by your mind's way of telling you something? Like, does she know something we don't?
So many questions. I guess we'll have to wait for the next chapter. But in the meantime, I think we should leave our listeners with something to think about. Like, what happens when the things we try to forget come back to haunt us?
Ooh, that's a good one. And do we have any control over it? Or are we just kind of at the mercy of our own minds?
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And be sure to tune in next time when we tackle Chapter 2 of The Penrose Effect.
Until then, keep those brain juices flowing.
And remember, sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are the ones we find within ourselves.